Our next presenter is David Parnell, Associate Professor of History. And he's going to talk to us about how to travel as a married couple in the 6th century.
Good morning, everybody. So there are few things more American than a road trip. Personal travel across the highways that crisscross our country in our own cars is an important national pastime. But, and here's the hook, what did travel look like 1,500 years ago when people didn't have personal cars? As I wrote a book about a 6th century married couple, it occurred to me that I had to stop and think about how they would actually get to the places that they were getting to. And I found that there were some interesting similarities and differences to our own travel. So today I would like to talk to you all about the rules for travel in the Roman Empire in the 6th century. So let's start with different modes of travel. For the ancient Romans, the most basic and cheapest mode of travel was, maybe not surprisingly, walking. Of course, it is also quite slow. A typical walking traveler in the ancient Roman world might cover around 20 miles per day by foot. A faster, but more expensive mode of travel would have been to ride one's own horse, if one had one. On horseback, a traveler could expect to cover around 35 miles per day. So, let's pause and map these figures onto an actual journey taken by the married couple that I studied. The Roman general Belisarius commanded soldiers in the army of the East and frequently traveled from his home, Constantinople, to the city of Dara, where that army was headquartered. Dara, today in southeastern Turkey, is about 930 miles from Constantinople, which is modern Istanbul. Taking this journey by land across the length of modern Turkey was particularly cumbersome. On foot, this trip would take nearly 50 days. By horseback, it could be cut down to 27 days, which is still much longer than a modern American road trip. One time that the General Belisarius made this trip, we know that he used a special method of quick travel called the imperial post system. Inns with stables dotted the major roads of the Roman Empire, and those with authorization could stop at each inn and change their horse at that stable along the whole road. This system allowed the rider to maintain a fresh horse and to go much further, up to 150 miles per day, than a rider who simply had to ride one single horse for the entire journey. Using this post system, a traveler could journey overland from Constantinople to Dara in just 8 days. This was the fastest possible mode of travel and was approximately 6 times faster than travel by foot and 3 times faster than travel by horseback on a single horse. We know that Belisarius utilized this post system at least once. In the spring of 542, the general needed it to rush from Constantinople to the east to oppose the unexpectedly early invasion of the Persian army. Spoiler alert, he got there on time, and he turned back the invasion. We know that his wife, Antonina, followed him a short time later. The sources of the time do not tell us which mode of travel she used. I cannot say for sure, but I would imagine that she utilized one of the slower options that we just discussed. The post system was very fast, but for those of you who've ridden a horse before, you can imagine that it had to be rather uncomfortable to cover up to 150 miles in a single day on horseback. So, in addition to foot, horseback, and the imperial post, there was a 4th travel option that blended comfort and speed. Belisarius, or any other traveler who could afford passage, could begin their journey in Constantinople by boarding a ship and sailing around modern Turkey to the coast, covering roughly 115 miles per day. The nearest coastal city to Dara was Seleucia by the sea. Landing here, the traveler could then proceed from that port overland to Dara. So this journey would take about 18 days in total, of which 9 days would be spent on the sea and 9 days would be spent on the overland portion. This map leads us to our golden rule for travel in the ancient Roman world. Sea traveler was generally faster than land travel. Because of this, travel between port cities that utilizes sail is almost always going to be faster than inland travel that requires the use of foot or horse. Therefore, on the map, journeys that appear to be greater by distance may actually have much shorter travel duration. For instance, the sea trip from Constantinople to the great port city of Alexandria down in Egypt was about 930 miles, but could be covered in just 8 days. By comparison, the land journey from Constantinople to the city of Corinth in Greece was only about 700 miles, but would take 20 days riding a single horse. Thus, for less distance, the total travel time was more than twice as long. So in the Roman period, travel between port cities that utilized sail was almost always faster and easier than inland travel that required the use of foot or horse. There were a few caveats to this general rule. First, sea travel was usually avoided in the winter, so there were seasonable limitations to this travel mode. Second, sea travel could also prove hazardous, as major storms on the Mediterranean Sea could easily damage or sink a ship. Third, if the wind were to unexpectedly die down, sea travel would suddenly become much slower than land travel because ships relied on the wind to push their sails. Finally, overland routes could be faster if the imperial post was used, as we saw with the example of Belisarius traveling to Dara. But even though it could be faster, there is little doubt that traveling along the imperial post was quite physically challenging and uncomfortable. Sea travel blended speed and comfort and would have been the travel mode of choice when it was an option. So in general, travel in the Roman world was faster and easier by sea. The Romans depended on sea travel and focused their empire around the Mediterranean Sea, which provided their preferred mode of long-distance transportation and travel. As the philosopher Socrates once said, "We live around the sea, like frogs around a pond." Thank you.